Hey guys, this is Gaijin Hunter. In this video, I want to cover the new Eternal Ammo for bowguns. This is a brand new system in Monster Hunter Generations where every bowgun comes preloaded with a certain amount of special types of shots. Now, the types of shots and the ammo are all set depending on the weapon that you have, and these are special things that you cannot make or bring with you or buy. So these come free of cost if you think about it that way, then you can use these things every single hunt without having to buy or restock them. The internal shots are incredibly powerful and made even more powerful thanks to a new armor skill called True Shot Up. You can buy decorations to make this, and each one slot decoration is 2 points, and this is a 10-point skill, so this is very easy to put on your armor set. What True Shot does is add 20% more physical and elemental damage to your internal ammo. This is a game changer. I wouldn't be surprised if they nerfed this in the next game. Okay, now that we know that True Shot Up is awesome and physical and elemental shots are both affected, let's take a look at all the internal shots, starting with all the ones that are affected by critical distance, which is the amount of distance that you have to be away from the monster to do optimal damage. Starting up, here is the critical distance chart. Now, I did put a little bullfango and a hunter on top, but this is just a very rough generalization. So if you want to use this sort of as a guide of how far you need to be, I think everybody understands level 1, 2, and 3 normal shots, which is about, I'd say 2 to 2.5, 3 hops away from the monster. So the first one we're going to be covering is a variation on the normal shot called the force shot. If you notice, the critical distance starts the same as normal, so right up next to the monster, but it goes back further than you normally can for normal shot. Now, normal shot has 12 damage for the level 2 shot, so take that into consideration when thinking about the motion value of all these ones. So the force shots are more powerful and they have a further critical distance than the normal 2. But to make that balance, they do have slower reload and larger recoil. It does shoot pretty fast, but not as fast as you can pelt out normal shots. Here is the motion value, and you can see down below a small chart here for how fast it's going to reload, based on the bowgun's reload capability and also the amount of recoil. Now, there is an armor skill called recoil reduction +1, +2, +3, and what those do is it takes that point in your chart here and it moves it back 1. So if on this bowgun you had a bowgun that had average recoil, you would have normal recoil for the shot. However, if you had recoil reduction +1, you would bring it back a slot to small, which is under the sum category. So very useful if using some of the more powerful ammo which has a lot of recoil. Okay, moving on, this is another variation on the normal shot where the force was very close and goes pretty far away. This is a long distance version. The long shot does 15 motion for level 1 and 18 for level 2, so definitely a little bit more powerful than the normal shots, and it does shoot pretty darn far away. So I find that this is really good if a monster is up in the air and it's hard to gauge distance. Generally, a long shot is pretty darn good. Okay, next up is the level 1 and level 2 heavy shot. This is pretty much the bowgun's version of the new shot that they added to the bow, which is when you shoot it, it goes down really fast, does not travel far, but it does a lot of extra break damage. If you notice, you cannot fire this thing right at the monster. You have to let the shot go downward a little bit. So here's the motion value. It's only 9 and 12, so they're not that powerful. However, if you do hit it at that critical distance, it will do extra break damage. That means that it's faster to break a part, but it doesn't exactly change the amount of damage that you do to the monster. I'm not a fan of this one, but I imagine some people, if you're up above on a cliff, shooting down on a monster like Lavinus could be quite fun. Okay, next up is the Sting Shot. This is for hitting weak points on monsters. Its critical distance starts from about midway between the normal and goes back all the way pretty far back, even back further than level 3 pures. And what the Sting Shot does is it's got a longer critical distance or further critical distance than normal, and if it does a critical hit, if you hit a spot with a weakness of 45% or higher. Now, they did change weakness exploit or tenderizer in this game for the hunters, where now it just gives you more affinity instead of more damage. But for the Sting Shots, it takes the same system as Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. So if you hit let's say the face of a Wraithian, it will do 25% more damage. So only 14% motion, so it's about the same power, a little bit more powerful than a normal level 2, but it has pretty decent reload and recoil as well. Okay, next up is the Stone Shot. If you notice, this one starts up right in front of the monster and goes to about 2 back hops away, so not too far away. The stone shot is not that powerful, it only has 10 motion, however, and it does have like medium speed and distance. But if you notice, it does do slightly increased break damage, so early in the game, if you use this for breaking parts and getting materials, it's actually quite convenient. Okay, next up is one of my favorites, which is the Triblast, and I don't believe this is a new shot. I think this shot has existed in Monster Hunter before. If you notice, you need to be pretty darn close to the monster for this to hit in critical distance. But the whole point of this is really not the motion value, that's only 3, so I wouldn't care too much about it. So this is very similar to a crag shot if you've used it before. You'll shoot it, it'll hit the monster and then do 3 explosions. If you land all 3, you'll do a lot of damage, because one blast does 25 fixed damage, this is like using a bomb, 30 fire, and 25 stun times 3 hits. So yeah, the Triblast, like you'll see the reload and recoil below, and there's a darn good reason, because one of these suckers is really powerful. Okay, next up is a new type of shot in this game called the Element Pierce. If you notice, this starts just like the Pierce shot, so if you're used to using a Pierce level 3, this is the exact same critical distance. However, you're really not going to care about the distance so much because it's only got 2 motion value and 3 motion value, which is what's affected by critical distance. However, look at the effect. So a level 1 piercing elemental like piercing fire, piercing thunder, will do 20 elemental damage per hit and a total of 3 hits. So if you're up against a larger monster and you're able to hit them like through the tail, through to their face, and land every hit, that's 60 elemental damage. The level 2, which is the really powerful ones for late game, can do up to 5 hits at 23 elemental damage per hit. So if you're up against an Uragan and you know how to aim it, or an Incantor or whatever, you can do some really big damage. However, I will note that for the piercing shots, when the bullet goes through a monster, all the different shots hit different parts of the monster. Now you can definitely hit weak spots easier using this, or you can accidentally go through to a point where you're hitting a part on the monster that's not actually that weak to the element. So you really, the damage on this is really hard to estimate. Okay, next up is a powerful new shot called the Elemental Pierce Shots. If you notice, this has the same critical distance as the level 3 Pierce, but honestly these things are not about damage, they're about elemental damage, so it's not that important to worry about. Now, Piercing Shot level 1 does up to 3 hits and for 20 elemental damage per hit, and level 2 does a whopping 5 total hits if you can go through a big monster at 23 elemental damage per hit. Now, piercing, like just the regular piercing ones, is kind of a tough one. You have to be doing this against larger monsters because the bullet will travel through the monster and hit them as it goes through. Now, because it's piercing, it is very easy now to hit weak spots. For example, if you shoot upward through a Durambros, you can hit the back because it's going through the body up through the back. However, you do need to know that because this is focused on elemental damage, all the different hit zones that each shot is going to hit is going to have kind of like a different weakness. So this is really powerful, but I don't think quite as powerful as the level 2 elemental shots, which we'll be getting to very soon. Okay, and then rounding out all these shots that are affected by critical distance is the slicing and the shrapnel shots. For slicing shot, what it does is it hits the monster and then does 3 hits for level 1 and 5 hits for level 2 that do 8 cutting damage per hit. So this is a way for bowgun users to cut off tails, which is really important early in the game, especially if you're hunting solo. The next one up is the Shrapnel Shot. I'm not a huge fan of it, to be honest, but once it hits, it splits off and does 3 different hits, and each one is worth 8 motion value. I guess it's kind of good if there's kind of like a section of the monster you want to hit, and you can shoot it from afar and it'll do a bunch of hits. Okay, and now on to all the shots that are not affected by critical distance. That means that you can shoot these things from any distance you want, and the power of them is not going to change. And first up is the hands down most powerful shot in the game, which is called the Dazzling Shot. This is super fast, it's got a long distance, fast reload, low recoil, no critical distance, and 35 motion per shot. That's insane. However, most guns only get like one of these, maybe 1 or 2 if that. However, there is a very rare exception, which is the Metroid arm cannon, which you can get a bunch of these shots, which is really kind of makes it overpowered in a way. So Dazzling Shot, pick up that arm cannon, it's available on DLC now, it's insane. And remember, True Shot will add 20% more damage, that's 20% on 35 motion. That's disgusting. So very good recoil, very good reload out of the gate. Next up is one of my also favorites, which is the Cannon Shots. If you do sort of the Lost Musket, it has this, which is really fun. But this is just a powerful fixed damage. It just lugs a huge cannonball, sort of like, you know, when you're fighting Darren Moran or something like that. It's just a long cannonball that blows up when it hits the monster. So you can use artillery skills to increase the fixed damage that these things do. At level 1 it does 5 motion, so you can forget about that. But the blast itself is 30 fixed damage and 10 stun. And level 2 is 40 damage and 15 stun. So not exactly the end all for stunning a monster. I think Crag Shots and the Triblast is definitely better for that. But if you have a monster that's kind of stationary, lugging cannonballs can feel really good. Of course, because it's a cannonball, it's got low reload and very bad recoil. Okay, next up, and this I think is one of the biggest game changers in Monster Hunter Generations, is the level 2 Elemental Shots. So this is fire, thunder, water, and ice. These things do massive elemental damage, and of course, just like level 1 normal shots for the elemental that you can take with you, they don't have critical distance either. It's only 7 motion, so you're not really going to be worrying about that so much, but one hit of these things is 58 elemental damage. That's a lot. Now, it's not so much of big of a jump from the level 1 elemental shots that you're probably wondering, well, why is this so much more powerful? And it has to do with True Shot Up. True Shot Up again makes this 20% stronger, and that stacks on top of elemental, which we'll get to at the end of this video. It's got fast speed, short distance, and great reload and very small recoil. And of course, because of the elemental shots, the dragon one is always treated special. So level 2 Dragon Shot is the same thing as a level 1 Dragon Shot, just more powerful. So it's a piercing hit, it can do up to 5 hits. It's very slow to shoot, but it does 48 dragon per hit. If you've got a bunch of players carrying this and you go up to an Incantor, you can pretty much lock it in and kill it really fast. Okay, next up is the Blast Shots. Now, I haven't really seen a lot of players use this, and I don't know why. The Blast Shots do 10 motion and 15 motion at level 1 and 2, but 25 blast damage and 50 blast damage is nothing to laugh at. Those are really good. So definitely a fun shot. If you have it on your bowgun, go ahead and give it a shot. That was not a pun. Okay, next up is the Wyvern Shot. This is kind of like the Wyvern Shot for the Gun Lance. It just sort of like, you know, charges up and blows up into a small explosion. So this just does 35 fire damage and a total of 2 hits if you're up against the monster. Nothing horribly special. Okay, now we have the status shots. So there's the poison smoke, which is really cool. So when you shoot it, it creates sort of like the same effect as if you use a poison smoke bomb. So this is really good if you need to sort of poison small monsters like Banabras and then carve them. So it does do 35 poison, so more than enough to poison smaller monsters. There is the flash shot, which is the same effect as a flashbang from a hunter, and a dung shot, which will shoot a piece of poop at a monster, which will either get them off a hunter if they're trying to eat them, or trying to encourage them to leave the area. I do like the idea on a bowgun though, because you can sort of look at all the different small monsters and hit them with dung and clear the area so everybody can focus on the larger monster, which is cool. Okay, moving on, we just have a slew of other really powerful buffing shots. Now for these, the reload and the recoil I didn't think were that important, so I just took them off the slide, where they're about medium for both. But these are shots that boost the stats of all the other players that you hit with the shot. So the Demon Shot lasts for 90 seconds, it gives plus 10 attack to everybody for their base. For melee people, it gives them sharpness plus 10%, so it's 10% increase in damage, plus they're less likely to bounce off on their attack, which is nice. And for gunners, it gives increased critical distance damage. I'm going to assume is 10% to match the melee one, but I'm not exactly sure. Demon Infinity is a cool one. It gives 15 attack, 10% affinity, sharpness plus 10%, and the gunner increase. And then the armor one, another 90 seconds, plus 20% defense. That's not plus 20, that's plus 20%. That's huge. Then you have super armor, which is 30%, and knockback protection. And you have demon armor, which is kind of an increase of both the demon ones and the armor. So you get the 10 base raw, 10% increase for either critical distance or sharpness, and you get 20% defense, which is crazy. I definitely recommend if you have a bowgun with this and you're doing like the Hyper, Silver, and Golden Raytheon Rathalos, once they do release those guys, they hit like a brick, so this could be a fun one. And then you have Remedy, which only lasts for 30 seconds. It just cures any status ailments like poison or paralysis or anything like that. And it increases natural recovery time, which means that the red, when you get hit, will recover a little bit faster. And it's not really important because there's really no monsters outside Magala who do it, but it does decrease the rate in which the frenzy gauge increases. And then finally you have group recovery. This is kind of like a small little group heal. So if you have a few hunters that are near the monster wailing on it and you hit one of them, it'll heal everybody around that guy for 20 health, which is about the same as an herb. And it also cures the frenzy if you really care about that. So that pretty much covers all of it. So what I was saying about the game changer with True Shot Up really goes with the double element light bowgun sets. What these things are is elemental +2, like fire attack +2 or thunder attack +2, which adds 10% +6 to your elemental damage. Elemental attack up, which adds 10%. True Shot Up, which is 20% more power. And then ammo conserve. And what ammo conserve is at 20% of the time, you won't expend the ammo that you used. So let's say you have 28 internal shots and you shoot one, there's a 20% chance that you won't actually use that shot. So you'll do it, but you'll still have 28 left. So ammo conserve is kind of hard to get in, but really good for maximizing the effect of your internal shots. Now with elemental and elemental attack up, there is a cap of 20% increase, but if you notice, because they stack at 20%, it's perfect. It works out just right. And the True Shot boosts it on top of that. So just do like a mental exercise. Like the level 2 fire shot normally does 58 element. Now, of course, it is worth noting that this element scales to the attack power on your weapon. So it's a little bit more complicated than that, but let's just say the base is 58 element. You're going to add 20% on for all the element attack ups, and you're going to add another 20% for True Shot. You're almost doubling it. It goes up to around 91 or 92. It's insane. For level 2 Pierce, you'll notice it goes from 23 up to 5 hits to 41 times 5 hits. So you may be telling yourself that the Fire Pierce is by far better, but remember, you're not always going to hit all 5 hits. They're not always going to hit a part on the monster that is super weak to fire. So it's super powerful, but I do recommend that the level 2 Fire Shots or the level 2 Elemental Shots is what you try to main and just get really good at aiming. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this kind of list. I'm sorry I didn't show video of everything, but that just would have took way too long, and I just unfortunately don't have the time. But I hope this tells you how powerful the internal shots are, what they do, and I hope you guys enjoy the system. Until next time, happy hunting.